Reported speech, reporting questions. In this video, we'll look at the structure of reported questions. We can use reported speech to report, that is to tell a third person, questions that someone asked. When we quote a speaker's exact question word for word, we call it a direct question. When we report what someone has asked, we call it a reported question. Let's take a look at the following situation. Pooh is talking to Piglet and he asked a question. Do you want some honey? We can quote Pooh's exact words with quotation marks. This is direct speech. When we report it to somebody else, we use reported speech. Pooh asked Piglet whether he wanted some honey. Let's look at another example. Pooh asked Piglet a question. What are you looking at? We can quote Pooh's exact words with quotation marks. This is direct speech. When we report it to somebody else, we use reported speech. Pooh asked Piglet what he was looking at. So, what exactly is the structure of reported questions? We use these structures to report yes-no questions and WH questions. But first, let's recap what yes-no questions and WH questions are. On the left-hand side, we have yes-no questions which are answered with yes or no. They can start with is or are, was or were, does, do, did, has, have, had, will, would, can, shall, may, could, should, or must. On the right-hand side, we have WH questions, which start with WH question words, including who, what, where, why, when, and how. Quick check 1. Let's see whether you have understood. Are these yes-no questions or WH questions? Yes, you're right. Only the first one is a yes-no question, whereas B to G are WH questions starting with WH question words. So, back to our first question. How do we report questions? A gentle reminder first. We shouldn't use quotation marks when we are reporting questions. Step 1. Use a reporting verb. For example, asked, wondered, etc. Other than ask a person, we can use other reporting verbs to report questions, including wondered, questioned a person, inquired a person, want to know, and try to find out. For example, I wondered where she bought the coffee. Pay attention that we usually use the simple past tense with the reporting verb. Step 2. Step 2 is quite different for yes-no questions and WH questions. For yes-no questions, use if or whether. For WH questions, we use the WH question word. Quick check 2. Let's see if you have understood. Should we use whether or if in step 2 or WH question words in step 2 when reporting the following questions? Yes, you're right. We would use whether or if for A because it is a yes-no question. As for B to G, we would use the WH question word when reporting them. Step 3. We put the subject before the verb. After that, step 4, we take away do, does, or did, and change the form of the main verb if necessary. A final reminder, remember to change the question mark in the direct question to a full stop in the reported question. Now, let's take a look at how we can use the 4 steps with some example questions. Let's take a look at some yes/no questions first. On the left-hand side of the table, we have direct questions, and on the right-hand side of the table, we have reported questions. Let's take a look at the first question. Are you happy? Ted asked me. Before we change the direct question to reported question, we need to take away the quotation marks. Remember, we don't need them in our reported question. Step 1. Use a reporting verb. Here, asked is kept and used as the reporting verb. Remember, for our reporting verb, we usually use the simple past tense because we are talking about something that happened in the past. Step 2. Use if or whether for yes/no questions after the reporting verb. Step 3. Put the subject before the verb. This is very important because in the question originally, the verb comes before the subject. In the direct question, are you becomes I was. Remember to change the pronoun from you to I, and the tense from simple present in are to simple past in was. Finally, check that there is no do, does, or did. And we don't need the question mark in our reported question. We change it to a full stop at the end. Let's take a look at question 2. Did you enjoy the party? Sue asked them. Before we change anything, we take away the quotation marks because we don't need them in the reported question. Step 1. Use a reporting verb. We can keep asked. Sue asked them. Again, asked is in simple past tense. Step 2. Use if or whether after the reporting verb. Step 3. Put the subject before the verb. Here, the subject was originally you. We need to change the pronoun to they. And the verb is changed from did and enjoy to had enjoy. We change the simple past tense to a past perfect tense. Pay attention, we drop the did. We don't need it in our reported question. Finally, check that we don't copy the question mark in our reported question, but we use a full stop instead. Question 3. Have you read the book? Ruby asked me. Take away the quotation marks before we change anything. Step 1. Use a reporting verb. We can keep asked, and this is in simple past tense. Step 2. Use if or whether for yes/no question. Step 3. We put the subject before the verb. I, subject, had read, verb. The pronoun you becomes I, and the tense of the verb changes from present perfect to past perfect tense. We check that there is no do, does, or did. And finally, we do not need the question mark. And we put a full stop at the end of our reported question. Great! Now let's take a look at how we can use the 4 steps with WH questions. On the left-hand side, we have direct questions, and on the right-hand side, we have reported questions. Let's take a look at them one by one. Number 1. How are you? Josh asked Jen. Before we do anything, take away the quotation marks because we don't need them in the reported question. Step 1. Use a reporting verb. Here we can keep asked. Josh asked Jen in past tense, simple past. Step 2. Keep the question word and place it after the reporting verb. Step 3. Put the subject before the verb. Are you in the direct question becomes she was in the reported question. Number 4. Drop do, does, or did if any. There's no do, does, or did. We can skip this part. And finally, check that we don't copy the question mark, but we use a full stop at the end. Let's look at the second example. Where did you go? Jem asked me. Step 1. Use the reporting verb. Jem asked me. Step 2. Keep the question word where and place it after the reporting verb. Step 3. Put the subject before the verb. The subject is changed from you to I, and the verb did go is changed from simple past tense to the past perfect had gone. We do not need the did in the direct question. Finally, we check that we do not copy the question mark and we have a full stop instead at the end of our reported question. Finally, let's take a look at the third example. What have you done? Sean asked my sister and me. Step 1. Use a reporting verb. We can keep asked in the direct question. Again, simple past tense asked is used. Keep the question word what and place it after the reporting verb. Step 3. Put the subject before the verb. The subject, you, is changed to we. And the verb is changed from present perfect tense, have done, to past perfect tense, had done. There's no do, does, or did. And finally, we check that we don't copy the question mark, but we use a full stop at the end of the reported question instead. Pay attention again that in the reported question, we do not use quotation marks. Here's a summary of the structures of reported yes-no questions and reported WH questions. Number 1, reporting verb. Number 2, whether or if for yes-no questions. And WH question word for WH questions. Number 3, subject. And number 4, verb. Don't forget to use a full stop for your reported question. And of course, like reporting statements, when you're reporting questions, don't forget to change the tenses, the pronouns, the time expressions, and the pointer words. For example, you need to change here to there, this to that, these to those. Let's practice. You can find these questions in your notebook. Use the knowledge you've learned from this video to complete the exercise. Here is a version with some hints. The red words are the subjects. The blue words are the verbs. The words highlighted in light blue are the WH question words. Complete the exercise and check your answers with your teacher. This is the end of the video. Well done.